what I wanted to start with is to tell you what we think dressage isn't, because a lot of people have misconceptions about it. Snooty people wearing top hats. Some, but actually we make fun of them too, so they don't count. People who go round and round in circles endlessly. Yeah, we do. But I can explain why, and we actually do other things, and I'll show you the other things along with Laura here in a couple of minutes. Anyhow, what dressage is a couple of things. You probably know it's a competition, and it's a kind of competition that's arranged progressively, level by level, to increasingly complicated and difficult things that build on simpler things. When we compete in dressage, we do it in an arena the size laid out by these cones, and there are a series of patterns, not unlike what reining people might do. When we do dressage, there's a judge that sits and gives a score from 0 to 10 for each movement that the rider's asked to do, and a typical test of between 15 and 35, depending on how difficult, how advanced the test is. And the interesting thing about it is the judge has a secretary who sits beside her or him and writes down everything that the judge says, so that when you receive your score at the end of the competition, you also get a long sheet with a series of numbers that tell you exactly what was good and bad in each of the individual movements, and a comment for each of the movements. And so you get a whole lot of feedback. It's not just, well, you must have liked the one, you know, with the blonde hair or the blue shirt or something. Aside from the competition part, though, dressage is very much a training system. A graduated progressive one that's been in existence for something like 475 years. And it's designed to take the natural horse and not replace it with something artificial, but to take what's natural and enhance it, maybe purify it, maybe make it be more elastic, more springy, more expressive, more balanced, because we know a horse without a rider carries maybe 2/3 of his weight on the front end. You put the rider on, you put a lot of stresses on the horse's front legs, and if you can ride it in a way that gradually shifts his weight towards his hindquarters, you preserve the horse a lot better. The rider is Laura Herndon, a longtime student of mine. In her professional life, she's a physical therapist. She's also a recent mother with a 7-month-old child, and she has time to do this along with it. The horse she's had since the middle of May, and he's what we call a gem. He's one of those schoolmasters that she got who knows more than she knows. If she does it right, he does it right. If she does it wrong, he shakes his head and says, well, you better try again, because that's not going to cut it. And so he's a great guy. His name is Casper. He's 19 years old, which says something about how dressage is supposed to preserve the welfare and soundness of horses as well. It's not one of those sports that when they're 5 or 6 they're burned out. It's not unusual, even in international competition, for a horse to be well up in his teens. So, why don't you start, Laura, just by riding within the perimeter of our arena and just let him hack long and free, if you will. Of course, he just got in here, it's a little exciting, but try to be as on contact as possible. Let him just go around. If you can extend your hands forward and not have any contact for a minute, let's do that. Right. And he's allowed to poke his nose out and put his head up and just act like a horse. People will say, people in other disciplines sometimes will say that, well, dressage is bad for horses. It makes them be jammed up, it makes them tense, it makes them hang on a hand, it makes them over-contracted. And my reaction to that is, yeah, that's called bad dressage. Good dressage is supposed to keep the horse free and loose and happy and carrying himself. Can we do it in the canter? Yeah. Let go of him a little bit. If he leaves, come back. Let go of him more. Right. Anyway, this is like pre-dressage. Now understand, this is a horse that knows a lot, so he looks a little more sophisticated than if we bring a little 4-year-old, out of that field that hasn't been bred to do it and hasn't been being trained to do it for a long time. But all the horses we work with, as we start, we want them to be able to go loose and free. We don't want to cram them together into something false or artificial. Land and trot when you're ready. Let them have some freedom. Just let them out. And so if they won't do that, that's the first thing that we set out to do. We make them trust us. We make them calm. We make them feel that they can be stabilized in any gait, meaning they don't just go the same speed, but if you give, they don't go faster. Because if that happens, it means you're holding them in, and that's internalizing tension. So you teach them that they can go around in freedom and maintain the same tempo. Partly by having the horse learn to follow his rider's weight and her body language. So if she posts this way, he trots this way. Now, let's stay on better yet, come on over here for a minute. We'll talk a second about the position that we use and why. We'll just stop here for a second. Form follows function. I'm sure you've all heard that. And that means if you're running and jumping and the horse has a lot of his weight up the front end, your stirrups are short, your weight is more up towards his shoulders a little bit, you've got a lot of angulation to absorb the shock in your heels, hips, and ankles. In this case, the horse most of the time is moving relatively slowly, and we're trying to shift his weight towards the rear. So we end up with an upright posture, stirrups that are a bit longer. We're not as interested in very depressed heels, which would be shock absorption. And that's not as much the issue here. We talk about shoulders, hips, and heels in a straight vertical line. And we talk about her leg softly enveloping the horse, just resting around it, like you take a big wet bath towel, soak it, and flop it over the horse's back. It softly clings there. It doesn't grip and pinch. It's not tense and tight, but it's on the horse because part of the nature of what we do in this particular discipline is we try to interact with the horse on a relatively constant, continuous basis. If you compare it to riding a fence line for 14 hours a day, or going fox hunting where you mainly either want to look at the hounds or flirt with the lady next to you. In those cases, you aren't supposed to be riding like crazy. You're supposed to the horse just does it. Leave him alone. If you want to do something else, tell him that. He does that. In this kind of schooling, we intentionally have a stride-by-stride, second-by-second interaction with the horse. In order to do that, your leg wants to rest on the horse so that he doesn't rattle around between the empty space. So that if you make a squeeze, he reacts. Likewise, with her hand, we talk about riding on contact, which means a following hand. Her elbows stay elastic and she absorbs the motion of the horse. Just walk for a minute. And like a fairly long free, but not a free walk, but a medium. And so her elbows will relax a little bit and her arms go somewhat with the motion of the horse following. It's not that we ride with a set, frozen in place hand, because if the hand is absolutely locked steady and the horse's head is moving, that means the contact or the pressure on his mouth varies. And when it varies, it's supposed to mean something. If it varies because he happens to put his head somewhere else and the rein gets loose, we've given him a message even though we didn't mean to. So if we can control the contact and keep it steady and ensure that any time there's a take and a give or a push and a release, it has a meaning that gets a response to which you give a reward, it makes much more sense and you can train him step by step much more easily than if he's randomly rewarding himself for things that really you wish he hadn't done. Beyond the center circle, those two letters, 20 meters. We talk about meters just because in that it's an international discipline, that's what the ring is arranged in. So 20-meter circle is 66 feet. It's harder to say that. Come in rising trot on your circle now. Now we think of, we'll stop saying dressage riding, we'll just say this stuff, as being a combination of behavior modification, training them to be obedient, and at the same time it's also meant to be a sort of bodybuilding. So there are some things that we ask the horses to do in order to accomplish more than if they just go around in loose reins and look wherever they happen to look. She's riding on contact, she's riding in rhythm, she's riding with a bit of energy, what we call the working gait, so we're asking him to push from his hindquarters and track up into his prints. And there's an idea that we call connection, meaning when the horse is accepting the bit correctly, it's not that he's hanging and leaning on the hand, but he's stretching pleasantly into it, so that if you make a correction in front, he feels it in the back, and if you push him from the back, you feel it in the front, but it doesn't feel like you're being dragged down the sidewalk by two Great Danes and saw the cat. On your 20-meter circle now, let's make an S turn changing through the circle. Don't knock my cone over. He knew better. Okay. Now, one of the things we try to do is bend them. So, and by that I mean if you're on a curved figure, the horse's spine matches the arc of the curve. You see, he's meant to be inside, it means her inner leg is at the girth, her outer leg is back. She's suppling with her inside hand, and she's dictating the length of his frame to have him a bit round with her outside hand and her supporting outside leg. Change through the circle again. And this is an exercise that you could call a lateral suppling one. If I'm standing on the ground and doing a stretch like this, stretching these muscles and contracting these, it's the same thing. If you look down on him from above, he's stretching his right side, he's contracting his left side. One more time, change through the circle. We have this odd notion in dressage about riding them from the inside leg to the outside hand. That's one of the, in the dressage Bible. And so we're wrapping him around the inside leg, we're pushing him forward, dictating his length, making him carry himself enough that he's not lugging and leaning and being heavy. And now sit and ride a transition into walk. Good. Trot again. In the transitions, we want them to flow through fluidly. We don't want them to look like they caught a leg in a hole and it was abrupt. We don't want them to look like they grabbed it and hang and sort of diesel along and stop when they happen to feel like it. Right? Trot again. Over on the far side so they can see you in profile. Transition to walk. You can bet that horses don't like to be pulled on. It's one of those unwritten rules. You pull one way, they pull the other way. If they're trotting along, you try to stop them by yanking back, they're likely to flatten out and grab the bit. If you can keep them soft and light and underneath you and holding themselves, we can make them come to walk, or for that matter, halt this time. Halt. All right, good hold. Trot on and then hold directly. He follows her body language. If her body is trotting, he's trotting. If her body stops trotting, he does too. It's a lot of control of your core muscles, of your abs and your center. That's fine. Go straight, use the whole arena such as it is. And start at the end of the ring, ride a 3-loop serpentine width of the ring. Now, he doesn't look exactly like a lower level horse. He's a little more put together. If we had the what we call the first level horse here, whose frame would be somewhat longer, it would still be round, but it would be a little less sophisticated looking. This is, for him, this is still fairly easy work. Push him on a little more. See the bend changes each time she crosses the center line. And now one more time, come on the center circle down here. Also turns out that horses don't like you pulling to one side. If you're on circle and you're trying to turn them by pulling a lot of the inner rein, lots of times their head turns, their shoulders bulge out the other way. If we surround them with our aids so that you, in a sense, curve them around and then just bend them as much as the figure requires, then your pushing aids send them where they're supposed to be and they have much less reason to resist. Rising trot and on the circle counter positioning. All that means is bend the other way. And we also make sure that they will go where your weight and legs push them. And if we make him look a little to the right, he doesn't have to go over there unless we want him to. That he's following her weight aids, listening to her pushing legs. On the long side, push straight. From the far end, turn down the center line, in sitting trot, and leg heeled over to my side. Now we have other kinds of lateral suppling exercises, lateral side to side. This circle and come on around. The most basic kind is called leg yielding, and in it, the horse is asked to move forward and sideways, using his hindquarters, keeping the rhythm when he's not shying at things. All right, leg yield out my way. Let him be a little bit easier. Make a simple angle, a longer angle, so that he can feel totally unstressed. So go another whole 12 meters forward for that amount sideways. Okay? Do it again. We talk about our aids as being a nonverbal language. It's different from cues or signals. It's meant that if there's not a button that produces a whole behavior, but it's like a language with verbs that say do this, and adjectives and adverbs, and modifying aids that say and do it on this angle, with this much length, with this much forward, whatever. So by combining the aids, we can end up with a much more complicated variety of responses than however few number of buttons exist with a horse. Looks nice now. Turn down the middle, do the staircase. Go forward and out, forward and out. Don't get his neck too short. She leg yields, and now her outside aids invite him simply to go forward, a half fold, yield out. See his left eye a little more. Good, do it one more time. We call that a staircase. It's part of making sure that the horses are doing things because of us and not somehow that they've invented and done it despite us. If you're making this pretty leg yielding and you want to go straight, you say, no, I think I'm going sideways. There's something wrong with that, you know? And let it walk a minute. So in general, we have this idea that while you're doing one movement, the horse is thoughtfully involved with you enough that all the other movements would be equally possible. It's not that he's so tuned in to this nice trot that you want to stop and he says, not soon, maybe later, but probably not. But you want to feel as you're riding this way, as she's riding along, she's maintaining a fairly subtle, nearly invisible conversation with him. A little bit, can I soften you this way? Thank you. If I want to lift you up a fraction with my hips, do you answer? If he says no, you make a bigger correction. If he says yes, you proceed. I can displace him with my hip if I want, okay, but I don't have to because I can. And you ask him all these little questions that nobody knows about but the horse and the rider, and it means that he's sort of right there, not literally on the tip of his toes, but right, boom, there where he needs to be for whatever else you might ask him to do. And of course, that's why we're not interested in doing it for 14 hours in a row, out looking at fence lines. But I always tell people, when you're in the ring, if you're going to be in here for an hour or for 45 minutes or something like that, you might as well actually teach him something and accomplish things, because it's not that pretty in arenas. If you want to just ride around, go on a trail ride, there's stuff to look at. And so this is the concentrated horse and rider all of one mind time. That's what we're doing.